The atmosphere, once thick with tension, now felt charged with an electric energy, as if the entire room had just witnessed a transformation. The receptionist was gone, escorted out by security, her humiliation undeniable. The guests who had silently observed the drama unfold now whispered among themselves, some in disbelief, others in awe. Vanessa didn't care for the whispers, though. She had made her point. She had made sure everyone in that room understood exactly who was in charge. As she walked through the lobby doors, her phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from her assistant. "Everything is proceeding as planned. The next phase is underway." Vanessa smiled to herself. It was all falling into place. Back at her office, her team was already moving quickly, pulling together the necessary reports, forwarding the incident up the corporate chain. The legal team had already been alerted, and the wheels of justice were now in motion. Vanessa knew exactly how this game was played. She had been underestimated for far too long, and now it was time for those who doubted her to learn just how serious she was. She entered the sleek black car, waiting for her outside its tinted windows, blocking out the prying eyes of the public. The driver nodded silently as Vanessa slid into the back seat, her mind already focused on the next steps. The ride was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine as she reviewed her plan. The next phase was the corporate board meeting, an emergency session called by the team. She had already prepared the necessary documents, the list of actions taken, and the names of those involved. When the time came, she would not hesitate to pull the trigger. As the car sped down the street, Vanessa's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from the legal department. "We've pulled the recordings from the hotel," the lawyer said. "We also have a list of similar incidents that occurred at that location in the past year. We're compiling everything into a report." Vanessa listened carefully, her eyes narrowing as she heard the lawyer outline the details. The evidence was damning. The hotel had a history of discriminatory behavior, and now they had just given her the perfect opportunity to expose it all. "Keep me updated," Vanessa said calmly. "Make sure everything is in order for the meeting tomorrow." As the car approached her destination, Vanessa leaned back, reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the early days when she had struggled to gain a foothold in the business world, when every step forward had felt like an uphill battle. Those days were long gone now. She had built an empire, and she had earned every bit of her success. But even as she had risen to the top, there had always been those who looked down on her, dismissed her because of her gender, her race, her appearance. Well, no more. The moment she had walked into that hotel, she had turned the tables. Now the power was in her hands, and she was not going to let it slip away. The car came to a stop, and Vanessa stepped out, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the building before her. It was time to finish what she had started. She had made her point, but the fight was far from over. She wasn't going to just let this go. She wasn't going to let anyone forget how they had treated her. And tomorrow in that boardroom, she would make sure that everyone knew the true cost of underestimating her. Vanessa walked into the boardroom with an air of unshakable confidence. The room full of high-powered executives fell silent as she entered. Her presence commanded attention, and every set of eyes in the room was now fixed on her. The CEO of Summit Enterprises had arrived, and she was not here for the usual corporate niceties. She had made her point, and now it was time for the next phase. She moved to the head of the table, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor as she took her seat. No one spoke for a moment, the tension palpable, the silence almost deafening. Vanessa knew the look in their eyes. Some were curious, others nervous. They had heard about what happened at the hotel, and they had seen the footage circulating online. The message was clear: Vanessa Clark was not someone to be underestimated. "I trust everyone has reviewed the situation," she said, calmly breaking the silence. Her voice was steady cold, even as she made direct eye contact with each executive at the table. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone commanded authority. One by one, they nodded, each of them fully aware that this meeting would not be like the others. "We have a problem," she continued, her tone sharp. "A problem that has been festering for far too long. Our company has been associated with a location that has a history of discriminatory behavior, and now the situation has escalated." A few executives shifted in their seats, exchanging uncomfortable glances. Vanessa could feel the unease in the room, but she didn't care. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially those who had turned a blind eye to such behavior, stand in her way. "I've already taken the liberty of gathering the evidence," she said, pressing a button on her phone. A large screen at the front of the room lit up, displaying clips from the hotel incident. The footage was clear. The hotel staff had treated her with disrespect, questioning her presence and making assumptions based on her appearance. The same staff had been caught on video mocking her, dismissing her as someone who didn't belong in their luxury hotel. The room grew even quieter as the footage played. There was no denying it. The proof was right in front of them. Vanessa let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. "This is not just about me," she said, her voice rising slightly with emotion. "This is about the culture we are allowing to exist in places we own, places we run. This is about the countless others who have been treated the same way, who don't have the power to fight back. I'm not going to stand by and let this continue." She paused, looking around the room. "The time for excuses is over. The time for change is now." Vanessa's words hung in the air as the executives processed what she had said. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on them, and she knew that some were already calculating the risks of challenging her, while others were starting to understand the magnitude of what was at stake. "I've already spoken with the legal team," she continued, her tone shifting back to business. "We're moving forward with the necessary actions. The hotel is being audited, and the staff involved will be held accountable. But that's not enough. This goes deeper than one incident. We need to change the way we do business, the way we engage with our partners, and the way we treat people. We can no longer afford to turn a blind eye." The board members were now fully engaged, but Vanessa could see the hesitation in some of their eyes. She wasn't just challenging their authority, she was questioning the very system that had allowed this kind of behavior to persist. "We're going to restructure our operations," she said, her voice firm. "And I will ensure that we lead by example, setting the standard for inclusivity and respect in every facet of our business. This is how we move forward." Vanessa glanced at the clock, noting that the meeting had been going on for nearly an hour. It was time to wrap it up. "I expect a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning with actionable steps. And let me be clear, there will be no compromises on this. We will lead or we will get out of the way." With that, she stood up, her chair scraping the floor as she moved towards the door. As she left the room, the executives remained, seated, each of them processing the enormity of the task ahead. Vanessa Clark had spoken, and there was no turning back now. The day after the board meeting, Vanessa sat in her office, the weight of her decisions hanging in the air. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from the legal department. "The hotel audit is complete. The staff involved in the incident has been identified. We have enough evidence to take immediate action." Vanessa read through the details, her eyes scanning the report with precision. The faces of the staff who had so casually dismissed her, so confidently mocked her presence, were now laid bare in the documents. She couldn't help but feel a sense of justice building within her. She had known from the start that this was not just about her personal humiliation, it was about the systemic issues that plagued the entire industry, an industry that for too long had thrived on exclusion and discrimination. The call for change was more than just a call for reform. It was a battle cry for accountability. The clock ticked by, but Vanessa remained focused. She had known the next step all along, but seeing it in black and white, the undeniable proof of the hotel's toxic culture, made it all the more real. She placed the phone down, straightened her back, and stood up from her desk. She needed to do more than just talk about change. She needed to take action. She grabbed her coat and walked out of her office, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floors of Summit Enterprises. She didn't care that it was nearly lunch hour. She didn't care that her schedule was packed. What mattered now was the next move. As she stepped into the elevator, her mind raced through the possibilities. It was time to call in the next phase of her plan. When the doors opened, she walked into the bustling office, the familiar faces of her team members going about their day-to-day tasks. But today was different. Today they were going to be part of something bigger. She walked to her assistant's desk where Carla was waiting, ready to support whatever decision Vanessa made. Vanessa said firmly, "I want to make sure we're ready to move forward with the next phase. I need a public statement prepared, something bold, something that makes it clear we're not just another corporation covering up mistakes. We're setting a new standard." Carla nodded immediately. "Understood, Miss Clark. I'll start drafting it right now." Vanessa turned on her heel, her voice cutting through the office as she called for her head of PR. "Lena, I need you to set up a press conference. We're going to make sure the public knows the truth. We're going to expose the systemic issues that we've all turned a blind eye to for far too long." Lena, always quick on her feet, immediately began making calls to set the wheels in motion. Within hours, the press conference was scheduled, and the world would soon know the story. But Vanessa wasn't content with just a public statement. She needed to send a message loud and clear. She wasn't just talking about one hotel or one incident. This was about a deep-rooted problem that needed to be confronted. She wasn't backing down. As she prepared for the press conference, she couldn't help but think back to the moment she had walked into that hotel, the dismissive attitude she had been met with, the judgment in the eyes of those who had no idea who they were dealing with. They had made the mistake of underestimating her, of thinking that she would just let it slide, that she would simply accept their bias and walk away. But that was not who Vanessa Clark was, and now she was going to make sure that no one ever made that mistake again. The time for silence was over. The time for action had arrived. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon, and by the time Vanessa arrived at the venue, the energy in the room was palpable. The media had gathered in full force, their cameras ready, microphones in hand, waiting for the woman who had already made headlines across the country. The buzz in the air was thick with anticipation, and Vanessa could feel it in her bones. This was the moment. As she walked onto the stage, the room fell silent, all eyes fixed on her. Vanessa stood tall, her posture perfect, exuding a quiet confidence that sent a clear message she was in control. She didn't need to say a word for the room to understand that she wasn't here to play games. She was here to make a point, to change the course of the narrative, and to show the world exactly who she was. "Thank you for being here today," Vanessa began, her voice calm but powerful. "I'm Vanessa Clark, CEO of Summit Enterprises. You may have heard about a recent incident at one of the properties under our management, an incident that has raised serious concerns about discrimination." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in. The cameras clicked as reporters jockeyed for position, their attention rapt. "I want to make it clear that the actions taken by the staff at this hotel do not reflect the values of Summit Enterprises. What happened was a failure of our leadership, and it's a failure that I take full responsibility for." There was a sharp intake of breath from the crowd, a mixture of shock and curiosity. Vanessa continued, her eyes scanning the room, locking onto the faces of the reporters as she spoke. "I also want to make it clear that I will not tolerate this kind of behavior in any of our properties under any circumstances. As a company, we have a responsibility to create environments where all people are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, or background. The actions of the hotel staff were inexcusable, and we are taking immediate action to ensure that this never happens again." She let those words hang in the air, each one hitting with precision. "This is not just about one incident," Vanessa said, her tone firm. "This is about the systemic issues that have been allowed to persist in many parts of our industry. For too long, the people who have held the power have turned a blind eye to the discrimination happening right under their noses. That ends now." She took a moment to glance at the reporters, her gaze unwavering. "We are already auditing all of our properties to ensure that the same kind of behavior cannot happen again. We are implementing new training programs for all employees, and we are working with external partners to ensure that our standards are met across the board. Additionally, I have personally made the decision to sever ties with the management of the hotel in question, and I will be overseeing the restructuring of their leadership team." The room was still the air thick with the passion, and the letters in the room was still the air thick. Realization that Vanessa wasn't just talking about policy changes, she was making it personal. She was drawing a line in the sand, and there was no turning back. "I understand that some of you may question whether these actions are enough. I understand the skepticism, but let me be clear, I will not stop until I am confident that our company is a place where every person, regardless of who they are, feels welcome, valued, and respected. This is not just an apology, this is a commitment to change." She paused again, letting the gravity of her statement settle in. "And I will lead that change, not just with words, but with actions. The world will know that Summit Enterprises stands for equality, respect, and justice." As she finished, the silence in the room was replaced by a flurry of questions. Reporters raised their hands, eager to ask, but Vanessa remained composed, her focus unbroken. This was just the beginning. The world had heard her message, and now it was time to see what would happen next. Vanessa had taken the first step in what would be a long journey, but she was ready for whatever came next. She had already made her mark, and now she was going to make sure it would last. The press conference had barely ended, but the impact was already reverberating across the media. Vanessa's words had shaken not only the public but also the corporate world. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since she left, the stage calls from major news outlets, industry leaders, and even her own executives. But as she sat in the back of her car on the way back to the office, she wasn't concerned with the noise outside. She was focused on the next steps, on how to ensure the momentum didn't die here. The world had heard her message, but now it was time to follow through. She entered her office, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floors, and took a moment to assess the room. It was the same room she had worked in for years, the one where she had crafted deals and built her empire. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a war room. Carla, her trusted assistant, was already waiting for her. "The board members are on their way," she said, handing Vanessa a folder with the latest developments. Vanessa didn't need to look at it to know what it was. She could already hear the hum of conversation from the other side of the door. The executives were nervous. They had seen the fallout from the press conference and the backlash that was brewing. They had never been in this kind of situation before, not on this scale. But that was exactly why Vanessa was in charge. She was the one who had the courage to confront the truth, to stand up for what was right. She wasn't just reacting to what had happened at the hotel. She was rewriting the entire narrative of what it meant to lead a corporation. The board members filtered into the room, each of them careful with their words as they sat down. There was a palpable tension in the air, but Vanessa wasn't intimidated. "Let's get to it," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "We have a lot of work to do, and I'm not wasting any time." She stood in front of the group, her hands folded calmly in front of her. "We are going to overhaul our entire training program. We're bringing in outside consultants who specialize in diversity and inclusion. We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination, and I will personally be overseeing the implementation. No more excuses, no more waiting." She paused, letting the words sink in. Some of the board members looked uncomfortable, others nodded in agreement, but none of them spoke up. Vanessa's gaze locked onto them, each one of them silently acknowledging the shift in power that was happening. This was no longer a conversation about making changes to corporate policies. It was a movement, a transformation. "We're also launching a company-wide audit of every one of our properties, ensuring that no more incidents like what happened at the hotel will ever take place again," Vanessa continued. "This is a chance for us to lead, to show the world that we stand for something bigger than profits. We're going to set the standard for corporate responsibility, and I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you how it's going to be." Her words landed with force. There was no room for negotiation, no room for half measures. This was the moment when everything changed. The executives shifted in their seats, some unsure, others unwilling to speak out, but all of them fully aware of the weight of the decision they were about to make. Vanessa turned to the head of operations. "Get the teams ready," she said. "We move fast. This starts now." The room went quiet as the board members nodded, some more hesitantly than others, but the plan was set. As the meeting continued, Vanessa could feel the shift within her company. She wasn't just leading it, she was transforming it. This was just the beginning. Vanessa had made her mark. The battle for corporate justice had only just begun. The weeks following Vanessa's bold announcements were filled with intense scrutiny and swift action. Summit Enterprises had transformed overnight, and the ripple effect was felt across the business world. As the company's leadership team worked tirelessly to implement the new initiatives, Vanessa continued to push forward with a quiet but unyielding determination. Her schedule was packed with meetings, audits, and discussions with consultants on diversity and inclusion, but she remained focused, unwavering in her resolve to change the corporate culture from the ground up. One morning, as Vanessa entered her office, she was met with a familiar face. Lena, her head of public relations, was already there, a folder in hand. "We've had some positive feedback from the public and industry leaders, but there's still a lot of work ahead," Lena said, her voice tense with the pressure of the ongoing media storm. Vanessa took the folder, flipping through the contents, scanning the headlines that had been generated by the press conference. Most of them were favorable, painting her as a leader who had finally taken a stand against a broken system. But some of the headlines she noticed were more critical, questioning the depth of the changes and whether they were just a corporate publicity stunt. Vanessa knew that the real work had only just begun. The changes weren't just about creating better policies, they were about changing the mindset within the company and across the industry. The system of complacency of tolerating discrimination because it was easier than confronting it needed to be dismantled. "I'm not done yet," Vanessa said, setting the folder down on her desk. "This is just the beginning. We've made a statement, but now we need to back it up with real, lasting change. We need to hold ourselves accountable not just for what happened, but for what happens next." Lena nodded, understanding the weight of what Vanessa was saying. "What's the next step?" she asked. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk as she thought. "We need to take this outside our walls," she said after a moment. "I want to partner with organizations that specialize in diversity, inclusion, and corporate accountability. We're going to set the bar for the entire industry. We'll lead by example and we'll make sure every business in this space knows that if we can do it, they can too. Lena's eyes lit up with excitement. I'll get on it right away, she said. We'll need to start drafting partnerships and identifying key influencers to back this initiative. Vanessa smiled slightly, the fire of determination burning in her chest. Make it happen, she said. With the plans in motion, Vanessa turned her attention to the internal restructuring. Over the next few weeks, the teams worked around the clock, auditing every property under Summit Enterprises, ensuring compliance with the new policies. Vanessa personally visited some of the hotels, meeting with staff, and observing firsthand the changes taking place. She spoke to employees, asking them about their experiences, listening intently to their concerns, and offering solutions. She was a leader who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty to confront the hard truths. As Vanessa worked, the word began to spread. Other companies in the industry took notice of Summit Enterprises' rapid transformation and the tangible changes it had brought about. Competitors who had once dismissed Vanessa's leadership began to reconsider their own policies and practices. Some reached out to her directly, asking for advice, for guidance. Vanessa knew this was just the beginning of a much larger shift. She wasn't just going to change Summit Enterprises, she was going to change the entire industry. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was Carla, her assistant, with an update. The audit's complete, Carla said. We found a few more areas that need immediate attention, but overall, everything's on track. Vanessa nodded, a small sense of satisfaction creeping in. Good, she said, her voice steady. Keep me updated. We're moving forward with Phase 2. We can't afford to slow down. As she hung up the phone, Vanessa looked out the window of her office, her eyes focused on the skyline of the city. She had always believed that change could come from the top, but now she realized that it was not just about her. It was about everyone in the company, everyone in the industry. She wasn't just fighting for equality for herself, she was fighting for everyone who had been left behind, who had been made to feel invisible. And as she stood there, her resolve stronger than ever, Vanessa knew that the impact she was making would be felt for generations to come. Vanessa sat in her office looking out at the skyline, the city bustling beneath her. She had come a long way in a short time, but she knew that the real work had only just begun. The changes at Summit Enterprises were already starting to show results. The audits had revealed more than just systemic flaws. They had exposed a deep-rooted culture of exclusion that had pervaded the company for years. But Vanessa was not discouraged. In fact, she saw it as an opportunity to completely reshape the company's identity. It was a painful process, but one that was necessary. She had already made significant strides by implementing the new policies, restructuring leadership, and introducing the diversity and inclusion programs. Now it was time to bring in the next wave of change. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Carla, her assistant, with an update. Miss Clark, the press conference about the diversity initiative is scheduled for tomorrow, Carla said. We've lined up the key speakers and the media is ready. It's going to be a big one. Vanessa took a deep breath, steadying herself. The press conference would be the next step in this long journey, but it wasn't just about publicity, it was about setting the stage for the next phase of transformation. Good, she replied, her voice calm and collected. Make sure everything is in place. We're not just talking about diversity. We're showing the world what true change looks like. She could already imagine the headlines times Summit Enterprises leads the way in corporate transformation asterisk. It was a powerful message, and it was exactly what she needed to reinforce her commitment to doing the work, not just talking about it. As the day wore on, Vanessa found herself in more meetings, more strategy sessions, each one more important than the last. The executives were on edge, some still uncertain, others fully on board with her vision. She was making them uncomfortable, pushing them to see things differently, and that was exactly what needed to happen. Vanessa had always known that true change required discomfort. As evening approached, she stood up, stretching her arms above her head. She was tired, but the job wasn't finished yet. She walked out of her office and down the hall to the conference room where a small team was meeting to finalize the plans for the press conference. We're ready, Lena said, standing up as Vanessa entered. The media will be here tomorrow, and we've got the narrative locked in. Vanessa nodded. Let's make sure we're crystal clear on what we're saying. This is about more than just diversity. It's about redefining the way businesses operate. This is the future of corporate responsibility. Lena smiled, clearly encouraged by Vanessa's energy. Absolutely, and the public is ready to hear it. The next day, as Vanessa stood in front of the cameras, the energy in the room was electric. The press conference was held in a sleek, modern event space, and every seat was filled with reporters eager to hear what the CEO of Summit Enterprises had to say. Vanessa's team had already set the stage with videos showing the company's commitment to diversity and inclusivity, but it was Vanessa's words that would make the lasting impact. She took the microphone, her gaze steady, her expression unwavering. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. "What I'm about to say is not just a statement, it's a commitment. Summit Enterprises will lead the way in creating a more inclusive, equitable corporate world. This is not just about policy changes, it's about a cultural shift that starts with me and extends to every single person in our company." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "We are not just changing our practices, we are changing the future of business." The room was silent for a moment before the cameras started flashing, the reporters eager to catch every word. Vanessa knew she was making history. This wasn't just about Summit Enterprises, this was about the ripple effect it would have on the industry, on corporations across the world. She was setting a new standard, one that would challenge every other company to follow suit. As she finished the press conference and stepped off the stage, Vanessa felt a surge of pride. She had come a long way from the woman who had been dismissed at that hotel. Now she was the one setting the rules. And she wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. In the days that followed the press conference, the media frenzy around Vanessa's leadership only intensified. The headlines were filled with praise but also skepticism. Critics questioned whether the changes she had promised would actually stick, or if they were just another corporate attempt at image management. But Vanessa didn't mind the scrutiny. She knew that the true test would come from within the company itself. Summit Enterprises was undergoing a seismic shift, and the changes had to come from every level, every department. Vanessa spent the following weeks in constant motion. Every day she met with different teams, walked through departments, and personally checked in on the progress of the audits and policy implementations. She was determined to make sure the commitment to inclusivity wasn't just lip service. It was in the culture now, and she wasn't about to let it fade. One afternoon, as she walked into the break room for a quick meeting with the leadership team, she noticed something different. The room was quieter than usual, and the usual chatter among employees was replaced with an unfamiliar tension. As she entered, all eyes turned to her, and she could see the unease in the faces of the executives. There was something in the air that made Vanessa pause for a moment. She sat down, locking eyes with her team, all of them looking as though they had just been confronted with an uncomfortable truth. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but authoritative. Carla, her assistant, spoke up, her voice a little strained. "There's been some pushback from senior staff," she said carefully, "and from some of our external partners. They're questioning whether the changes we've implemented are sustainable. Some of them are worried about the impact it will have on the bottom line." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "They're worried about the bottom line," she repeated. "After everything we've just done, they're worried about profits." Carla nodded, her face tense. "Yes, it seems like there's concern about the costs associated with the new programs, and some people believe the changes will be too much of a shift for the company to manage." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her expression hardening. "I don't care about the costs," she said, her voice unwavering. "What I care about is making this company a place where people are respected, valued, and treated with dignity. We've been blind for too long to the issues that have held us back, and that stops now. If they don't see the value in this shift, then maybe they're not the right people to be leading the company into the future." The room went quiet. Vanessa could feel the weight of the words she had just spoken, the challenge they posed not only to the executives in the room, but to everyone who might be resisting the changes. But she wasn't backing down. This was her vision, her mission. "We're not just changing policies, we're changing lives," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "And if that's too much for some people to handle, then they need to leave. I won't compromise on this. The work we're doing here is bigger than any one person's comfort zone. We're going to make sure that every single person who walks through the doors of Summit Enterprises knows that they are valued, and we will not stop until that is the truth. If they don't agree with that, then they're free to walk away." The tension in the room shifted. What had started as an uncomfortable silence was now filled with a sense of resolve, as though Vanessa's words had broken through the wall of resistance. Carla looked around the room, then back at Vanessa. "I'll make sure the message gets out," she said, a newfound determination in her eyes. Vanessa nodded. "Good. We move forward. No looking back." As she left the break room, Vanessa felt the weight of her decision settle into place. She knew this was just one battle in a much larger war, but it was a battle she was willing to fight. Summit Enterprises would no longer be a company that turned a blind eye to the injustices that had been allowed to fester for too long. This was only the beginning, and Vanessa was prepared to lead the charge no matter the cost. As the weeks passed, Vanessa's resolve was tested in ways she had not anticipated. The resistance she had felt from some senior staff and external partners was not just a momentary setback, it was a battle for the soul of the company. But Vanessa was not one to shy away from challenges. She thrived in adversity. Summit Enterprises had undergone a transformation, but the true test was in maintaining the momentum. Every day, Vanessa's inbox was filled with updates, reports, and feedback on the progress of the company's initiatives. The training programs were being implemented, but there were still employees who needed to be convinced that the changes were real. Some managers and staff members had embraced the new culture, while others were hesitant, unwilling to fully let go of the old ways. Vanessa's leadership had always been about clarity of vision, but now she was finding that she needed to be even more hands-on than before. She spent hours in meetings with department heads, discussing the progress of the diversity programs, reviewing audit results, and addressing concerns head-on. Every conversation seemed to come back to the same core issue, the fear that the company's profitability would suffer. To Vanessa, this was a shallow concern compared to the deeper need for equity and inclusion. But she understood that change, especially on such a scale, took time and required both vision and strategy. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Vanessa sat alone in her office, staring at the city below. The lights twinkling in the distance were a stark contrast to the weight she felt in her chest. She had fought so hard to get to this point, to push Summit Enterprises into a new era, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there were still too many people waiting for her to fail. That night, her phone buzzed with a message from Carla. "There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss the financial implications of the new initiatives." Vanessa had been expecting this. The board members had been cautious, and now they were questioning the impact of her reforms on the company's bottom line. She knew this was coming. There were always going to be people who cared more about profit than people. But she also knew that this meeting would be a defining moment. She was not going to back down. The next day, Vanessa walked into the boardroom with the same confidence she always carried. She was ready to face whatever questions they had, to defend the changes she had implemented, and to push forward with her vision for the future. As the meeting began, the tension in the room was palpable. The board members, some still uneasy with the sweeping changes, exchanged nervous glances. The first question came quickly. "Vanessa, we understand the importance of diversity and inclusion, but how can we justify the costs involved? These programs are expensive, and we need to consider the financial impact." Vanessa did not hesitate. "The financial impact of these initiatives is not an expense, it is an investment," she replied, her voice firm. "We are investing in the future of this company, in creating a culture that attracts top talent and fosters innovation. We cannot afford to continue ignoring the value of diversity. The world is changing, and if we don't change with it, we risk becoming irrelevant." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "This is not just about the immediate numbers on a spreadsheet. This is about our legacy, about the kind of company we want to be. We want to be a company that leads, not a company that follows." There was a long silence in the room as the board members absorbed her words. Vanessa could feel the pressure, but she stood her ground unwavering. "I understand that these changes are uncomfortable for some of you," she continued, "but discomfort is necessary for growth. If we want to create real change, we need to challenge the status quo, and that is exactly what I am doing. I will not let anyone derail this mission, no matter the cost." The board members exchanged uncertain glances, but Vanessa could see the shift in their expressions. Some were still skeptical, but others were beginning to realize the depth of Vanessa's commitment. She had already made the first move, and now she was about to see it through to the end. The meeting ended, but the battle was far from over. Vanessa knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but she was prepared for whatever came next. Summit Enterprises was on the path to becoming something greater than it had ever been before, and Vanessa Clark was determined to make sure it stayed that way.